Hi, I'm Mark Lawson with Morningstar Music Publishers, and we are very pleased to be joined today by composer Mark Patterson. Mark has written a new piano book called Songs to Stir the Soul. We're going to talk about that book and give a little bit of background into his life. So, Mark, welcome. Glad to be talking to you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little about your background and where you are and what you do.
Sure. I am in Midlothian, Virginia. Midlothian is just a suburb of Richmond. You don't really know when you leave Richmond and enter Midlothian. So we're in the greater Richmond, Virginia area. I grew up in Texas, though, and grew up as a young church musician, singing in choirs and playing piano. So church music has been part of the fabric of my life forever. And it continues to be. So I direct a large Presbyterian church music program here in Midlothian, and do some piano things as part of that, a lot of choral work as part of that as well.
Okay. Well, I know this is not your first piano book with us, but this is a wonderful new book. Kind of tell us about the background of this book and how you had the ideas and kind of why you chose the contents for this.
Sure. It's been fun to put together. This book has been, I would say, about 10 years in the germination phase. And it's been fun to see it finally come to fruition. Many of these pieces are pieces that began as improvisations for me, things I would play for communion or prelude. And they evolved. So they evolved, and then as I was writing them down, of course, that forces you to edit them a little bit, and it forces me to make some creative choices that are set in stone a little bit more than the improvisation part. So it's been really fun to just see these pieces shape and change and morph and then find this final form. A couple of them, the Amazing Grace setting that's in here, the Blessed Assurance setting, those are pieces actually that I would do with my choir. A lot of times we would do a warm-up, and then sometimes we would just sing a familiar hymn together just to get voices going. And those two pieces really came out of that. They're just renditions. I would sit down and kind of improvise as my choir would sing. And so that's where those two came from. And then the others come from spirituals and from some of the great hymns of our faith.
Well, I was thinking when I look at the contents of this book, it's kind of like comfort food for the church pianist. Most of the titles are familiar and very comforting, which I think is something people are looking to during this time, particularly with online services.
Sure, and it's who knew that the context of this present day that we would be in, and as the creative process unfolds and the publishing process unfolds, all of these pieces were started and written long before we knew what COVID-19 was, long before the current wave of protest and issues that we're dealing with now. So it's interesting how the context has deepened, I think, for these pieces in just the last months. But these are songs, I guess, songs to stir the soul. These are songs that are right in the deep part of my soul. I think these are songs that I find myself turning to. I think the spirituals are always powerful pieces that were written in times of struggle and in times of strife, and those are melodies and texts that we lean on in these times, and the same thing with those familiar hymns. And so my charge was to try to take that familiar ground, but bring some new energy to it, bring some new depth to it, and hopefully the book does that and provides the church pianist with some new things to help stir that in our church music.
Great, that's great. Well, I'll put you on the spot and see if you have a favorite or two in the book.
They're all my creative children. So, when we give birth to a piece, it's like, they're just like our little babies out there. But there are, I'd say one that really is a powerful piece to me, and one that really I wanted to bring together carefully is the one that's called Longing and Belonging. And that is a combination of sometimes I feel like a motherless child, and he's got the whole world in his hands. And it begins really as a lament. It begins with "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child," and it's in the minor mode. It's lamentful. It's got this bass kind of drone that brings weight to it. And then it goes into "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands," but it begins with that is set in minor mode. And so it's that hopeful text, but still with something weighing it down. And then finally in the last verse, it goes to major, and it's kind of like a little sunrise, the hope and the faith of that message comes out in that last verse. And so it really takes us from a sense of longing and a sense of hunger to a sense of knowing that God has got it all in his hands and it's going to be okay. So that's one that has been particularly powerful to me.
Well, for those of you watching this that would like to see samples of the book, you can see these on our website in the piano section under the new releases. And we invite you to check that out and take a look at Mark's newest creation. So thank you, Mark, so much for joining us. And we wish you the very best during this time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and blessings to everyone out there who is creating music for their congregations. Thank you.